Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John. Today we're going to be reacting to Apple Music's top 100 albums of all time. This is a curated mix, not based on streaming figures. It's Zane Lowe, Rodgers, Nile Rodgers, and other artists like Charli XCX were pulled and had input into this. So we'll see. There's been a lot of discourse online. So far, I've managed to avoid almost all of it by just staying off of socials. I wanted to give you my raw, unfiltered, honest opinions on this top 100 to see if this out-of-touch streaming service that kind of helped kill off the album is going to do any justice to a list like this. We're going to go ahead and start with number 100, which is Body Talk by Robin. This is actually a really good record. I was a little bit late on the Robin train, but we're off to a good start here. And why choose between dancing and crying when you can do both? At 99, we have Hotel California by the Eagles. The Eagles, is it unexpected? Of course not. It's a snapshot of 70s excess and the soundtrack to the come down. Definitely no surprise there. Number 98, Astroworld by Travis Scott, as we are in the middle of another lawsuit that's trying to be settled by Travis and his legal team. Buy a ticket and take the ride. I really don't feel like this is the way. This doesn't feel like the move to me. And while this album Astroworld is good, upon revisiting, I just don't feel like it aged as perfectly as some hip-hop fans would lead you to believe. On to number 97, Rage Against the Machine. This is a great choice. This is an album that really started to pave the way for rap rock and rap metal to become a lot more mainstream. 96, Lorde's Pure Heroine. Lorde was just 16 years old when this record came out. This record is immaculate and possibly only topped by her sophomore effort Melodrama, which I would love to see here, but I kind of doubt it. Number 95, Confessions by Usher. Such a solid, in a way, groundbreaking, more so for the early 2000s mainstream version of R&B that became so successful, not just for Usher, but really a lot of artists that followed in his footsteps. Unfamiliar with this one, the first unrecognized one to me. Turning another new leaf, A Seat at the Table by Solange. This is Beyonce's sister. This was the record that really critically put her on the map, and if you'll allow the pun, gave her a seat at the table. At number 93, it's hard to complain. I feel like some people would want this higher, but I feel like that seat might be reserved for Beyonce herself. Moving on to number 92, Flower Boy, or Scumfuck Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. The man could pull off a track like 911, but then throw in a collab with Kali Uchis, Where This Flower Blooms, that really just, like the Apple is saying here, embracing the art of emotional bloodletting and setting rap in a bold new direction. 91, Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1 by George Michael of Wham fame. Okay, we're seeing a little bit of GM on here. That's unexpected, honestly. Back in Black by AC/DC. Was this the final album with Bon Scott? Bon Scott died that same year. That happened in February. This album came out in July. They already had a new singer in Brian Scott, and not just anybody, somebody that could sing his ass off and do justice to the older tracks as well. 89, wow. Okay, the Fame Monster Deluxe Edition by Lady Gaga. I do appreciate this. So it's got the full album, it looks like. Yeah, it's got all of the original tracks from the Fame. In that case, I'm actually super stoked on this because Lady Gaga, some people will attempt to write off her artistry as style over substance. To me, it always felt like her style was an accent mark on top of the art that she was putting out into the world. I Put a Spell on You by Nina Simone. An absolute classic. Massive Attack, Blue Lines. Don't come for my throat here. I've not heard this record. Let's see if I know number 86. The answer is yes. My Life, Mary J. Blige. Gospel, Grace, and Grit fuel the queen of hip-hop soul's soul-bearing masterpiece. Golden Hour is up next. Yes! Golden Hour is her defining masterpiece. It's a country pop very lush hybrid. This really captures that glowing aura of being in love and just feeling at peace. This one transcended country. It became something else entirely, and that's a masterpiece. Number 84, Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg. This came out in the early 90s, right as really the West Coast hip-hop movement was gaining a lot of traction in the mainstream. I really love his flows, his smooth-ass, buttery voice cutting through some of these beats. 83, Patti Smith, Horses. This is a record that, admittedly, I've only heard singles from, or else a selection of songs. You can find us in the club. That's right. Get rich or die trying. This is an album that just saw him so hungry, so thirsty, so ready to take over and conquer the game that nothing could get in his way. 50 ascended because of how willing he was to be in your face with what he stood for. Scrolling on to number 81, After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. My mother-in-law would be praising hallelujah right now. After the Gold Rush is one of Neil's classics, Harvest Moon being another one of my personal favorites. After the Gold Rush is probably the first multi-platinum album to be recorded in someone's basement. So really, is Neil Young, is he bedroom pop? Should we reclassify this? Cracking at number 80, the Marshall Mathers LP. This album is scary at times. It's terrifying in the sense that you can really see that split persona between Slim Shady, what's him, what is Marshall Mathers. Looking back on just how raw the album cover even is, it really screams out about how gritty and unabashed and unapologetic Eminem was. We're moving into the 70s. Are we going to take a 70s album? No. They went a very, very, very different direction. Norman fucking Rockwell by Lana Del Rey, an artist that I have never understood the full appeal of. That being said, Norman fucking Rockwell is her best album. 78. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Elton John. The instrumentation took a bit of a sidestep. It went in a little bit more experimental, dare I say, direction. That is a classic. 77, Like a Prayer by Madonna. This is an excellent record. Obviously, we had Like a Virgin, then Like a Prayer comes out. It's got these choirs and cathedrals and a lot of people pissed off for a lot of different reasons. I'm here for it, man, because this is absolutely aces. 76 is a Bad Bunny record. Oh, man. Oh, who would have guessed? Bad Bunny on a list of the greatest albums ever made just feels kind of ironic because it's come out at a time when albums feel more like playlists, and the tracks that I have heard from Un Vero Senti are just not great. Maybe it's a personal thing. At 75, Super Duper Fly, Missy Elliott. This is her magnum opus, I guess you could say. This is an album that, for Missy, is a time and place in music that I don't feel could ever be replicated ever again. 74, The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails. It is obtuse, it's aggressive, it is jaded, it's nihilistic, but the animalistic undertones cannot be overstated. This is an album that never misses, despite constantly swinging for the fence. I know we're only at 74, but I'm not mad yet. 73. Okay, some Steely Dan on here. At number 72, wow, that is recent. That's super recent to be on a list like this. If anything, I would have absolutely gone for Control and would have liked to have seen that. This definitely feels like it's reaching more than the diving board on the album cover. Trans Europe Express by Kraftwerk. Incredibly detailed and vivid and just all-encompassing in a way. Number 70, NWA, Straight Outta Compton. Finally, my shout-out has arrived. This is the collective that combined rappers like Eazy-E and, of course, Ice Cube, among others, for a classic late 80s album that started putting hip-hop on the map. 69, come on, 69 God. What do we got? Master of Puppets by Metallica. Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of the metal band's most iconic and memorable albums. 68. It's like the music gods were listening to me. I'm over here complaining about a lack of rock on the list. It seemed kind of lackadaisy, carefree in a way, but the riveting instrumental work and the detailed bass and guitar and just the way that they all came together, Julian Casablancas and Albert Hammond Jr., Nick Valenci, really this entire band, to show how incredibly detailed, but also just laid back they could be and make it sound incredible. 67, Dummy by Portishead. Wow, I just listened to this album, I swear, for the first time this year. This is definitely a breathtaking listen that borders on trip-hop, a little bit of that glitchy style, but it's also so comforting. It's oddly comforting. 66, we've got the Smiths. The Queen is dead. Oh, buddy, I got opinions on the Smiths, and you're not gonna like it if you're a Smiths fan. Music to cry with or laugh at. All within the same songs. Yeah, I could say that I've had some laughs at Smiths songs. 65, we've got another hip-hop classic. De La Soul. A lot of you might know for some of their work with like Gorillaz and other artists over the years. It's so trippy, so transcendental. At times it can be very focused and very rap heavy, but then it can just get ethereal almost, and that's where the sampling comes in. 64. Okay, I don't know this. 63, it's the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Are you experienced? Classic music like this transcends time. This was a debut album. Who puts out something like this is a debut. It's why you're gonna see it on any list of the best debuts ever. At 62, they've put Tupac, All Eyes on Me, featuring tracks like California Love, is, I believe, the final Tupac album, at least in his lifetime. I mean, he's got a track for his mother, he's got a track for the club. There's all kinds of soul statements on this record. At 61, we've got Sade, Love Deluxe. I think that easily this is her defining record for many, many reasons, but for the simple fact that it almost has this dreamlike quality to it. Andy Warhol, Painting a Banana. Of course, the Velvet Underground in collaboration with Nico. This is a record that I appreciate for Nico, but, you know, as much as we're gonna say R.I.P. Lou Reed here, I don't get it. I remember listening to this record again one night, and my wife was already asleep, and she was like, "Can you please? What am I hearing? Is that the drums? Is that the bass? What am I hearing?" And I'm like, "Sorry, I'm listening to the Velvet Underground, okay?" 59, AM by Arctic Monkeys. Oh, come on, dude, come on. AM is not the best Arctic Monkeys record, not even close. When albums like Humbug, Favorite Worst Nightmare. I mean, come on, dude. Even their debut maybe would have made more sense over this. That's certainly a take. Let's keep going to 58. Another British invasion, the Britpop invasion, the takeover. Oasis, What's the Story? Morning Glory. At 58, I can definitely see this making sense. British pop was definitely something that had bands like Blur and Pulp and Oasis battling it out for chart glory. This is arguably the most, or one of the most important records from that time period. I would also probably throw The Verve's Bittersweet Symphony in there. 57, Voodoo by D'Angelo, was a record that I was kind of reintroduced to whenever I discovered the Comeback album. D'Angelo, there was so much hype between Black Messiah whenever that released in the 2010s. A sexy album in many ways. 56, we've got The Cure with Disintegration. Not too many records are manicured to this degree where it feels like every time you listen, it's a different experience. You're able to take something else from it. 55, we have Rihanna with Anti or Anti. I don't know. This is an album that I have conflicted feelings on because Rihanna was never really an album artist. I think most people can recognize that. I can see it being more culturally important than it actually is like one of the top 100 albums ever made. At 54, we have A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. This is not something that I'm incredibly familiar with, but definitely deserving of a placement on the list. 53, Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. This is an interesting pick for the Stones. Not that it's not one of their classic albums, but I might have expected something a little bit different, maybe Sticky Fingers. They're putting Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction in number 52. Certainly scratches a primal itch. It's the guitar work from Slash. Axl Rose was obviously in his prime vocally. It's really an album that can get you dancing, headbanging, and maybe even bring a couple of tears to the bro dude's eye. Sign of the Times by Prince at number 51. There's a sight for sore eyes. This is an album that's long but so worth it. Beyond just the words or the music or the guitar tones that Prince is able to put out in this extremely sexy, lavish way. Hounds of Love, Kate Bush. Nothing else has ever come close to its mix of pop hooks and avant-garde sound sculpting. I do think that it's a bit like a Zen garden in a way. At 49, we've got the Joshua Tree from U2. Oh boy. I could have sworn that they would have put Songs of Innocence on here. Yeah, I haven't forgotten. It's been a decade, and that album is still on my old iPhone. Scrolling on to 48, Paul's Boutique. Hell yeah, Beastie Boys. It was a labor of love, literally manually cutting and stitching tapes together to make up a lot of samples. More minimal rhymes, but the ones that were there were extremely potent. This is their best album. I will die on that hill. And at number 47, oh, Jesus Christ. Are we sure that this is the time to be putting Drake on a list like this? I don't know that it is. It definitely features, I think, a lot of Drake's best flows, but Take Care is overly long, with this appearing at 47. 46, we have Exodus by Bob Marley and the Wailers. Yeah, this is an album that has stood the test of time. I'm not huge in the kind of reggae fusion. I'm not super well versed, and I'm not a super fan of it by any means. But this one succeeds and lives on because it was forward-thinking. 45, we have some Bjork. This is an album that I've not listened to. At number 44, we have some Stevie Wonder, Inner Visions. Yeah, baby, that's right. It's a magical album because it was definitely political, but it was very personal in its own way, but still very pristine and pretty, not too cleaned up, kind of pop-friendly in a way that jazz wasn't always that way, especially at that time. 43, Remain in Light by Talking Heads. I finally picked this up on vinyl, a revolutionary reimagination of American punk movement through the lens of African music. They're able to do that much in just 8 songs to make this one of the most important records ever put to tape. Number 42, Control by Janet Jackson. It's great to see that there's been a resurgence in appreciation and love for Janet. This was the 1980s. This, in a way, was its own brand of cultural reset. Number 41, Outkast. Let's go. I kind of thought it was going to be Stankonia. I knew we'd be seeing some Outkast, but you know what? We're gonna allow it. I thought maybe even AT-Aliens, but that's cool. This is just a bar setter, and people continued chasing their tails still for decades to come. Aretha Franklin, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You at number 40. I don't think that I've actually heard this full record. The Queen of Soul gets the respect she deserves. Illmatic by Nas, absolutely. There was nothing like this at the time. It was starting to get into that slightly more conscious era of hip-hop in the mid-90s. It was definitely very beat-heavy and in a way simpler. It's definitely a brutal, raw listen that captured the life of a young man that was really dealing with real shit. But let's see what we have at number 38, Tapestry by Carole King, another album that I have not heard, but have heard great things about. 37, Enter the Wu-Tang. 36, Chambers. Let's go, Wu-Tang Clan. Do we dare? At 36, Beyonce, Graining on That Wood, Surfboard at number 36. This is an album that really saw Beyonce, I think, start to take albums much more seriously. Lemonade would have been the album that I think made so much more sense to actually make the top 100. I still would have not put it this high. This just feels absurd to me. Number 35, The Clash, London Calling. This is going to be on pretty much any top 100 list that you see ever, but it's a little higher than I was expecting it to be. At number 34, Public Enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. I have not heard this full album. It seems like Apple is going heavy on the idea of like political hip-hop and stuff that influences that. 33, Kid A. Well, there you go. They took a very different route here because this is in no way a guitar album. It's not driven by guitars. It's not driven by a traditional bass. It's very oblique in that way, and it paints this almost depressing canvas that does see slight sunspots kind of floating in from time to time. We're moving on to number 32, and we've got Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G., an almost ironic title in hindsight, knowing that Biggie did not live too much longer after this. This was a time when shit got extremely serious, way before social media. The Notorious B.I.G. was somebody that just had this entirely different persona, but evolved immaculately. Scrolling onwards and upwards at 31, Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. This is an album with a song you ought to know that is not only iconic and captures teenage rage beautifully. The song was written about, along with maybe a few others on the album, Joey Gladstone, Dave Coulier from Full House fame. It revealed itself as being that album that could pull off that level of angst, but not make it feel like she's just selling melodrama for the sake of it. It's for the sake of the art, if anything. At number 30, we move into Billie Eilish. Wow, that is that's an interesting pick. It's not that great of an album. I really like this album. I do. I really like some of the albums that I would boot off of this top 100. Even if this had been at like number 80 or 90, I probably wouldn't have had this level of a visceral reaction to it. But at number 30, let's see how they justify this. Experimental, pitch black teen pop. It's pitch black, bro. It's not that dark. Come on. At 29, we try to move on past the Billie Eilish placement with A Tribe Called Quest, another classic hip-hop album, The Low End Theory. It's great to see the representation here for, obviously, wow, I didn't mean to do that. Wow, I was gonna say more, but I guess the dark side of the moon just revealed itself. The Dark Side of the Moon is like a musical rite of passage. This is a generational album, something that has spoken to so many different people because of how varied and out of pocket so much of the music, even the vocals, the layering on this thing is so psychedelic. At number 27, Led Zeppelin 2 by Led Zeppelin, of course. Led Zeppelin 2 features some of their most important songs, and while I feel like the argument would be like, where's Led Zeppelin 4? Or, I don't know, even Coda. There's other records of theirs that definitely got way more experimental with their approach. This is the one that proved that they were masters of what they did. Lucky number 26? not lucky. Kanye West, My Beautiful, Dark, Twisted Fantasy. Kanye has done so many things that I disagree with over the years that it makes it hard to want to come back to his music. This record and the way that it was woven together is this ominous tapestry with incredible guest features. The production is so detailed, so hypnotic that it's hard to look away or pry your ears off of it. I'm scared. We move on to the number 25 slot, and it's Miles Davis. No need to fear. The brass on this just the playing, the overall feel of my childhood. Miles Davis just really putting so much emotion into something that you can't necessarily describe with words. Moving along to number 24, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, David Bowie's classic. Definitely something that keeps you on your toes, and I think that it was so bold for the time, and people saw that. 23, Discovery, Daft Punk. Fuck yes. Discovery is absolutely one of the most fun, electronic, danceable, house experiences that you could really ever ask for. Daft Punk are unparalleled with their precision and with their commitment to having the robotic vocals combined with something that felt a little bit more human than what we got on, say, Homework. Number 22. Oh, no, not the boss. No, I refuse this. I can't stand Bruce Springsteen, the artist. The man? No qualms with, no problem, okay? Let's move on before I blow a brain gasket. And wow, my favorite Beatles album, possibly. Revolver is that bitch. That's right. It's psychedelia. They took their acid, they took their trip to India, and they come back, and they've got songs like Tomorrow Never Knows. Are you kidding me? It's a ridiculous moment in time that will never be replicated. Songs like Eleanor Rigby are here, and they're able to work in traces of the sitar, a lot of outside instrumentation that proved that the Beatles, the Fab Four themselves, were not going to be pigeonholed with songs like I Wanna Hold Your Hand. Time to crack open the top 20. Starting off with Pet Sounds, personally one of my favorite albums of all time. It has songs as familiar as Wouldn't It Be Nice, but it also has ones that are a lot darker and a lot more beautiful and not reminiscent of really anything that they had ever made up to that point in time. From Pet Sounds at 20, we move into The Chronic by Dr. Dre at number 19. Okay, great album. It was never one that, to me, aged as well as some people thought it did. At 18, we've kissed it a little harder. We had to go with the deluxe version, Taylor's version, too. We gotta make sure that we're only streaming Taylor's version because we gotta make sure that the billionaire becomes the multi-billionaire. I definitely prefer the original version. That's always what I'm gonna be listening to because the vocals sound different. There's no other way to get around that. 1989, the original was a younger, more naive, perhaps, Taylor, and you just can't recapture the magic with re-records. From that nonsense into number 17, yeah, these definitely belong side by side. Marvin Gaye wasn't your typical, modern, you would think, out-of-touch artist that has no idea what the common man is going through. Into the Sweet 16, Blue by Joni Mitchell. Yeah, this belongs here. This definitely belongs here. An exploration of love and loss, both intimate and universal. At number 15, it's Adele's 21. This is a really good album, but in no way should it be this high. It was so big and so many people took it into their lives. I can never live up to that again, and that's fine. That was said, respect. I respect the statement on that. At 14, there it is. I was talking about Bob Dylan. I manifested this, unfortunately. Karma slapping me upside the face. Highway 61. Revisited. Dylan goes electric and brings the entire culture with him. So obviously early on, a very folksy blues rock traveler moving into his plugged-in era. I've of course heard songs from this, but not beyond your Like a Rolling Stones or the title track even, Desolation Row. Lucky number 13, The Blueprint by Jay-Z. Yeah, wow, that's high. That's high for that. No pun intended with that. Only a baker's dozen left to go. At number 12, oh, we are doing multiple albums, I guess. There's an exception to the rule for Radiohead, and I will allow it. It's absolutely one of the most important albums to rock music ever because it invited in so much more than just the macho crowd. It wasn't made for them. It was made for the more introspective, deep thinkers that struggled with emotional insecurities and things like depression, and Tom York was able to take his voice, make it an instrument of its own along with his bandmates. Lucky number 11 is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. You can't go wrong, but they did them just ever so dirty. I mean, slide that into the top 10, my guy. It's a breakup album. It's a scandalous album. It's one that almost saw Fleetwood implode internally, but it came out sounding like the most polished diamond being sold at a luxury jeweler. All right, so if Rumors is only number 11, what is number 10? Number 10. You know what? I asked for Lemonade. I asked for Lemonade earlier. Instead of, not in addition to, instead of the self-titled Beyonce album. You gotta be shitting me. As someone who thinks that Lemonade is Beyonce's best album, but are you seriously telling me that Lemonade goes over Rumors. And barely just above that, it's Nirvana's Nevermind. Huh. Okay, so we got a rock album in the top 10. I think the In Utero is the better album. It's close. I love both of these albums dearly, but Nevermind in the top 10 is cool to see because it's some representation for grunge. At number 8, Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. I don't know it as well as some people do. This was some people's entire personality for over a decade. Back to Black was really the final thing that Amy made that felt like a coherent statement before her untimely passing as a member, unfortunately, of the 27 Club. But her blend of brassy retro soul and brash lyrics is inimitable and immortal. Good Kid, Mad City. Finally, somebody else agrees maybe that's his best record, although I wouldn't count him out on appearing higher up in the top 5. This is a masterpiece in every sense of the phrase. It's an all-defining coming-of-age story that saw Kendrick dealing with his vices in a very empathetic way. It's an album that saw storytelling rising to that next level, and he became that torchbearer for a new generation of conscious hip-hop, but still the ability to not just lose the knack for making hooks and having that shine to them. At number 6, Stevie Wonder. So we do have a couple of artists sneaking in multiple records, songs in the key of life. Stevie Wonder really set the bar high and paved the way for a lot of the records that we heard in the decades that came out, like the 80s, the 90s, that brand of R&B and soul and funk that had such a vivacious spirit to it that felt fully alive. Smoking on top 5's Blonde by Frank Ocean. That feels highly overplaced. Putting this over Good Kid, Mad City, Blonde, it just doesn't sit right in a certain way. Blonde is good. I think even from an objective point of view, most of us can recognize that, and I definitely do. I think it's actually kind of great in its own way, but I personally haven't developed a severe connection to it that makes it feel like a can't-miss album forever. At number 4, Prince. Okay, so we already did see Sign of the Times, which I personally think is his best album, but okay, here at number 4, Purple Rain. I probably would have switched the two, and maybe not put either of them quite this high, but it's Prince, so I'll stop yapping now. Top 3, I'm crossing 3 fingers for this. Abbey Road by the Beatles. Is it one of the best albums ever made? Absolutely. Is it deserving of this placement? I personally would have swapped it out, but I have no complaints with this appearing as high as number 3. We hardly ever sat down and had nothing. There was always some sort of idea. There was blooming, expressive, emotive ideas all over this thing. And while I could go the rest of my life without hearing Come Together, because I used to work at a place that would play it constantly, there's too many good songs like Oh Darling, Maxwell Silver Hammer, I Want You, She's So Heavy. That is a 2-parter song that runs on for over 7 minutes, which was unheard of back in the 60s. Octopus's Garden, I Want You, Sun King, Here Comes the Sun, Her Majesty. It's ridiculously stacked. You can't get enough of Abbey Road because it never stops giving. At number 2, Thriller by Michael Jackson. I was wondering, we saw Janet, right? We saw Janet Jackson. I think we all knew that at some point, at least, MJ was going to enter the chat. Here he is with his album Thriller, which is perhaps a bit, just ever so slightly overrated in the sense that it's just been so consumed, so discussed, so everywhere for the longest time. I have nothing negative to say about the record itself. A landmark that did nothing less than redefine the scope and reach of pop music. We're stalling for number 1. What could it be? And number 1, the number 1 album of all time, Apple Music selection, is Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I've never heard this album. I've never heard this album. I know that infamously this was like her only album, I believe, ever released, and then that was it. Okay, Good Kid, Mad City. Where is To Pimp a Butterfly? There was so much socially conscious hip-hop all over this list, and you're not going to include one of the masters of that style, of that flow, one of the most important albums of the 21st century? Not to undermine this record that I have not heard, admittedly. Again, I've heard Doo-Wop, is that the name of the song? Yeah, I've heard Doo-Wop and maybe a couple of the other singles from it. I think I've heard the one with Mary J. Blige, but no, I've never ever heard this album. So I feel a little awkward right now with this being number one. Also, just because I'm thinking back to all the albums that I didn't see that thought should have made the cut. I guess I'm going to have to check out this album because it's number one and I haven't heard it. So I, we'll have to see what that's all about. But that was an adventure, guys. That was certainly an adventure. Thank you for taking the adventure with me. There's definitely several artists like Queens of the Stone Age, Depeche Mode. Even if I wouldn't have it in my top 100, I was surprised to not see Gorillaz. What can you really expect from a mainstream publication that's also trying to give itself a pat on the back with the cred? I respect a lot of the artists that put this together and helped as a part of the assembly process and voting, but it came out pretty wonky. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to call it there. My voice is pretty shot, and I am hungry.